And welcome to another parenting podcast. This is part of the Beyond Sunday podcast. I'm here with Dr. Tim Riley. Dr. Tim Riley, how are you doing today?
I am above average today.
Ooh,
thank you.
Very good. And I'm Peter Bay, and I'm delighted to be with you all today as we learn more about how to parent in ways that are just a bit more effective. So one of my favorite Rodney Dangerfield quotes, and the only Rodney Dangerfield quote that I know, is this: the best improv is the one most rehearsed. And so for much of my life, I've thought like, oh, I just fly by the seat of my pants. And then with parenting, that just gets me. It gets me in a lot of trouble. And so what we just finished learning on the last podcast, by the way, there's a bunch of these. If you're jumping in fresh right here today, go back to one and start from there. But in the last podcast, we talked about, hey, it's better to have a game plan. It's better to know what you're going to expect so that your kids know what you expect from them. And that leads us to today, Dr. Tim. What do we got?
Well, first of all, that idea of intentionality has been a theme that runs through everything here. And way back to the first time we talked about the fact that there may have been a time in history when you could afford to just be casual about parenting. But if that's true, that time no longer exists. I mean, way too much information, way too many sources of influence, way too much noise, way too much stimulation in your kids' lives. And if you think that out of all of that background noise, they're going to just pick out your voice and listen to what you have to say without you being intentional about it, then you're mistaken.
Yeah, we are out of the Stone Ages in the parenting era. So move forward.
So what we're going to talk about today initially is we've set things up by saying, all right, we've taken the time to be intentional, to decide what we expect so that we're clear about what that is. And then the next thing we want to do is to communicate that to our kids. And the easiest way for me to reinforce the importance of this is to talk about the idea. So suppose when you were driving in today, nice morning, sunny, all of that, you're driving down the highway and you see a speed limit sign that says, 45-ish. And 5 minutes later, you get pulled over and the cop writes you a ticket for doing 48. How are you going to feel about that?
That is unfair and ridiculous.
Precisely so, right? So you didn't tell me what you wanted, and now you're going to punish me for something that I didn't even know was a requirement. It's not different for your kids. We have this idea that, there's some kind of like osmosis or something that takes place, and your ideas soak into their brain, and they just know what you expect of them instead of you communicating that. Mm-hmm. So if you want to be fair, you communicate exactly what you want to communicate to them.
Okay. So instead of 45-ish, it is 45.
It's 45.
You know
you're
you know
good
what
right
it
up
is.
to 45, over 45, not so much.
So Dr. Tim, you don't drive 1 mile per hour over the speed limit?
Never.
Never?
No,
Wow.
No, never 1 mile over.
No, wow. No,
Always 5 miles
7
over,
is 7, 8 is great. None of those rules.
Yeah.
9, you get a fine. Okay. Not for Dr. Tim, right on the button. Great. I'll have to ask your wife about that. So we need we need better expectations. We need exact, not 45-ish, 45. So how does this pan out in the way we parent?
Okay, so I mean, a couple of different ways, or at least two that we'll talk about today, the two most important ones, and especially for younger kids, almost everything that you give them by way of direction is verbal.
Okay.
Right? 4-year-olds don't read. Well, most 4-year-olds don't read. And so if you want to communicate something, you are going to communicate it verbally. And very often we tend to do that within the course of just sort of ordinary conversation, and we'll slip in an instruction here or there, or whatever. And it takes a long time for those kids to figure out, well, which of these is serious? Which do I need to attend to? Which do I not need to attend to? So one thing that I want to talk about is just how to give effective verbal instructions, which seems like it should be pretty straightforward, pretty easy, and probably is, but in my experience, it's worth taking some time to sort it out because I see a lot of examples where it's not done very effectively.
Yeah, absolutely. And it seems effective. It seems like it should be easy, but I would look at it like this. There are some people who are very handy. They can fix most anything in a house. My dad was that way, but he was a career sheet metal worker. And so he already had some foundational tools for building, for fixing. And so then if he was learning a new feature or a new, what would be the word, technique or whatever, it got in that toolbox a little bit quicker. And some of us parents may have some of these bedrock building blocks for asking great questions, and some may not. So I want to hit this at the most granular level and say, let's make sure the right tools are in the toolbox.
Okay. So one other thing to point out here is that I do have a handout that goes into more detail on this, and I think it's worth having. And I think we're trying to figure out a way to be able to make that available.
It's going to be, yes. So on the description, there will be a link for you, a handout for a verbal. Is it called verbal expectations or?
Yeah, giving effective instructions. Something
excellent.
Like that.
Yeah, so you can click on that to read further. Please take the time to do that. Print it out. Put it somewhere where you can refer.
Okay, so number one, make sure you have the kids' attention. Seems basic enough, but we often are giving an instruction while the kid's walking out of the room, while we're walking into the other room to do the laundry or whatever. So that means you're looking at them and making sure that they're attending to you. 3-year-olds are easily distracted. Some parents are easily distracted. So you want to make sure they have their attention. If necessary, and this is true for some kids, it's like, look at me. Mm-hmm. I'm going to give you an instruction now, or I'm going to tell you what I want. And then we've got it, right? So we're removing points of argument really going forward. It's, I didn't hear you say that. Well, if I know you're looking at me, I know you heard me say that, right? I asked you to look at me, so I know that. And that's not every kid, but it's certainly true for some kids. So number one, make sure you have their attention. Number two, make it clear that you are telling them to do something, not asking them to do something. If it's a command, then it's a command. I mean, it's perfectly fine to ask your kids if they want to do something, but if you're giving them an instruction, the expectation is, I'm telling you to do something as your parent, I expect that you're going to do that. And the way that you make it clear that it's an instruction, a command, is you phrase it in a positive way, right? You don't ask a question and it's like, it's please wash your hands now. Not, would you like to wash your hands now? Or maybe you should think about washing your hands now, or something like that. Again, that's like 45-ish, right? It's fair to them to tell them exactly what you expect. And also you don't use the opposite of that, right? Telling them what not to do. Your hands are so dirty. Don't get your hands so dirty. It's like, tell them what you want.
Okay. So tell them what you want, not the negative side of it. Please wash your hands, and don't ask the question of, hey, would you like to wash your hands right now? And put it on them.
Because one answer to that, one perfectly reasonable answer to that is no, thanks.
No, I'm good. Yeah. Okay.
So that, and you started with the word please, which I like, because saying, please, would you like to wash your hands now? Sounds kind of odd, and you can sort of train yourself. First of all, it's polite, and you're demonstrating manners and all of that kind of stuff. But secondly, you're less likely to turn it into a question if you start it with please.
Sure.
Please, would you like to wash your hands now? It doesn't sound right. Please wash your hands now. Sounds legitimate.
I feel like I've heard it a lot where someone says, could you please do this? And that's still a question, though. That still gives them an out?
Yeah. Well, yeah, but they didn't start with please. Please, could you do this?
So start with please.
Yeah.
Please do this.
Please
make it a command, not a question.
Please hang up your coat. Please put your shoes in the closet.
Tool in the toolbox.
Okay.
Check.
So make sure you have their attention. Be clear that you're giving them an instruction, not asking them a question. 3, keep it short. For one thing, particularly little kids have a limited range in terms of how much they can remember. So my rule of thumb is anything more than 7 words is a lecture, and lectures never change behavior. So the thing that you always have in your head is, all right, I got to remember this. I keep it short. So it's please hang up your coat now, not, your coat belongs in the closet, not on the floor. Please hang up your coat and then put your shoes in the closet. A little kid is going to get lost in all of that. Be specific about what you want. Just state it and move on.
Okay. So I have an exact example of what I do with their coat, because I've said, hang up your coat, please hang up your coat. So then if I find a coat on the ground, regardless of season, I throw it out the back door. And then they're like, they don't like that. And then they go grab it and they put it. I'm sure there's some bad things with this behavior I'm doing. What would be like the negative ramification of me throwing their coat out the back door?
Well, probably the main thing is you're going to want to get your kids signed up for therapy now.
So true. So true.
No, I've done that. I find shoes, when my kids were little, I'd find shoes somewhere they weren't supposed to be.
Everywhere.
And I'd hide them.
There you go.
And then the next day they're looking for their shoes. And I don't know. They're usually in the closet, aren't they?
Right.
Well, you might want to look in the garage and give some vague instruction. And so that reinforces that in a way that just reminding them doesn't, right?
Nice.
You're delivering an actual consequence, not just a reminder. As long as you're willing to remind, they'll accept as many reminders as you want to give them. Right? There's no upper limit for that.
Right. Well, good. It has been effective. Once that coat goes outside, especially in the wintertime, they retrieve it pretty much immediately.
Yep.
And they put it where it's supposed to go.
Yep. And you don't have to give a lot of instructions around it. It's action, right?
You don't. Okay. So not a question, not a suggestion, 7 words or less, and anything else.
Use start commands, not stop commands.
Okay. Explain that.
Tell them what you want, not what you don't want. So it's not stop jumping on the bed. It's sit down, get down from there. Because if they stop jumping on the bed, then they could start, skipping on the bed or flopping on the bed or bouncing on the bed or.
You know what? I believe that's the whole premise of like the monkeys, skipping, jumping, dancing.
Jumping on the bed.
Yeah. And they just keep smashing their noggin.
And this goes back to what we talked about before in terms of the way that we give instructions is by telling kids where we want them to go, not where we don't want them to go. It's the same way you'd give me directions on how to get here. You'd give me the route that I should take, not try to, don't go to Fremont, don't go to Lincoln, here, go this way.
Got it.
So again, everything that we're talking about here, Peter, is what's fair to the kids. Right? It's what's the best way to approach them in a manner that they can learn the quickest, what gives them the most benefit.
Okay. So start and stop directions. So use more the start and not the stop. Ask them, or not ask, we're not asking questions. We're giving commands. So we're going to tell them what we want and not what we don't want.
Yeah, I mean, we have a really good sort of scriptural model here. I mean, it's not the 10 suggestions, right? Or the 10 questions.
Right.
It's 10 commandments. It's instructions. And by the way, what's the purpose of the 10 commandments? To give you guidance for living effectively.
Yeah,
right?
keep us in bounds.
It's okay for us to give kids commands. We're the ones who know stuff.
Yep, give us a curb, keep us on the road. Okay, let's keep it going. I love all these tools I'm getting in the toolbox.
Okay, number 5.
It's getting heavy.
Be specific, direct, simple, concrete terms. Don't make them guess what's important to you. Tell them. Please put those blocks in the toy box now. Not maybe we should pick up in here a little bit.
That's like way more than 7 words, though. Did you outdo it?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, it's 9. Okay.
Oh, boy. We'll work on that.
Yeah.
But either way, it's direct, it's concrete. So please put the box in the toy box.
And stop lecturing.
The blocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, stop lecturing. So specific, direct. I see this all the time with myself, with my friends. I think gentle parenting, there's parts of that are helpful, but there's parts of that turn into tons of lectures. When you do this, Johnny, it makes mommy and daddy feel this way.
Yeah.
Blah,
which
blah,
in my
blah.
mind is just giving the kid ammunition.
Right. They're like, now I know.
I got him.
Got him under my finger. So less words, make it clear, concrete, not 45-ish.
Yep. And then, and I think we talked about this last time, is tell them when you want it done, right? If you just suggest that there's this task and it should happen at some point, then you're giving them latitude to decide when it should happen, which is okay if that's all right with you.
Right.
But a couple of things are likely to happen. They will forget or you will forget. And so then you end up sort of demonstrating a pattern of acceptance of non-compliance, right? If they're passively non-compliant, as we've talked about before, they just don't quite get around to it, you forget, and so on. So it's like, please put the toys in there now. And that's fewer than 7, right? Okay. So, turn off the game before you come upstairs. So either a specific time or in the sequence of events, get this done before dinner, right? So that there's some way for you to hold them accountable to that time frame.
Yeah, and very simply put, I mean, even for us as professionals, we talked about this. When you make goals, they ought to be SMART goals. They ought to be measurable. Otherwise, you never know if you reach them. And this is the same thing with our kids. We have to give them chances to be successful, so then we can cheer them on.
Yeah, I mean, and that's always the subtext of all of this is you're creating opportunities to reward your child for successful performance, which is what we want, right? If you ask nothing from them, you get nothing, then you're going to have no opportunities to praise success because there isn't any.
So we've got hammer, screwdriver, vice grip. Are there more tools that we can put in this toolbox?
If you think it's necessary, and this is true for some kids, and this relates in some way to asking them to look at you first, ask them to repeat the instruction back to you.
Okay.
What did I just ask you to do?
You asked me to repeat the instruction back to you? No.
Very good. Yeah,
okay, got it. Oh, I got nervous there.
Okay. So, all right, please put the toys in the box now. What did I say? What are you going to do?
Put the toys in the box now.
Okay, good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. See how nice that was? How just pleasant that whole
Tim
exchange
Riley's my
was?
new dad, guys. This is great.
Okay, so for younger kids in particular, your kids are a little older now. They're older,
Yep, 975.
975. Good, nice spacing there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're going to be able to monitor more. The 5-year-old may be a little iffy, but especially for younger kids, you give them one instruction and then give them a chance to complete that instruction. If you give them multiple instructions, there's something called the primacy effect or the recency effect. More than likely, they'll remember the first thing you told them and none of the rest, or the last thing you told them and none of the rest. And then you get upset because they don't seem to be able to remember that. So it's put those cars in the toy box now, wait until those are put away. Thank you, now put your shoes in the closet. Wait until that's done, then give another instruction, not, please put those cars in the toy box in the closet and the books back on the bookshelf, and then go upstairs and get your pajamas on and brush your teeth.
Holy smokes. Or what I've noticed with our kids is just like, go clean your room is not nearly as effective as, hey, can you put your clothes, or not a question anymore, I'm learning, put your clothes in your hamper. Then they know, like, that's step one.
Right.
Their room is still dirty, but a little less dirty than it was before, and it's biting off less than clean your room.
And if you start with clean your room, then the pretty good probability that they have a much different definition of what a clean room looks like than you do.
Sure.
And if you're saying you're giving them instructions one at a time and then saying, okay, now we're done, you're instructing them in what a clean room is instead of just asking them to, giving them this sort of vague, non-specific command, clean your room.
Yeah. Excellent. All right, let's keep this thing going.
Okay, give the instruction once and then wait 10 or so seconds for the child to respond. So there's actually research on this and how long, and again, here we're talking about younger kids, maybe the 3 to 6 kind of range, but it's true for older kids to some extent as well. For them to hear what you say, process it, and then kick it into action is up to 10 seconds. That's a long time. And so, what we get instead is, okay, put your shoes in the closet. No, I mean it now. Put it in the closet. Get your shoes, put them in the closet right now. Do it now. I want you to get your shoes and get them in the closet, right? And the kid's just paralyzed by this string of things as opposed to, please put your shoes in the closet. And then if something happens or doesn't happen, the next thing you do is not a reminder, it's a consequence. So the consequence is, thanks, great job, thank you so much, on to the next thing, or it's now I'm going to have to enforce this because I don't give instructions that I'm not prepared to enforce, which is another one of the things we keep in mind here, right? You want to be careful about what you ask for. And it's not, I mean, during the course of a day, you give dozens, maybe hundreds of commands
Yes.
without realizing it. You know, hand me those books. You know, hey, grab that for me.
And remember, our goal was what, 5-1 for like encouragements to commands.
Yeah, encouragements to directive, corrective.
Okay, so correctives more so than commands. So give me that book is not as destructive. You don't need 5 encouragements for that one.
No.
Okay.
But thanks is good. So and that leads to the next thing, which is you don't give instructions you're not prepared to enforce.
Okay.
If you do, then essentially you're setting up a model that says, I'm going to follow through some of the time. And there's a pretty reasonable chance that your kid will continue to test to see whether or not this particular instance happens to be one of those times that you're not going to enforce.
Hey, I want to go back one rule to the waiting for 10 seconds. Is this something where is silence works better? Give them a verbal 10 count? Well, I mean, do I actually like a referee in a basketball game make sure they get past half court with a hand?
Yeah, you
count?
should have a striped shirt in the closet and be. No, it's almost never a good idea to count out loud.
Okay.
Particularly if you have a kid who's inclined to be a little more testy or non-compliant. If you count out loud, you're going to count to 10. You're going to teach them to wait until 9.5 before they do anything, right? So that sort of element of surprise is when the hammer is going to fall works to your advantage as a parent. So it's like, put the books in the closet and let it rest, right? And it's hard. I mean, we tend to be really verbal and give lots of directions, and you're trying to shape your kid's behavior all the time with language. And again, that's not unreasonable. But if you're in a situation where you're telling them to do something, you want to have some clarity about that. I mean, there are times when you don't need your kid to ask you for more information. If you say, "Don't this." Keep that fork out of the outlet. Stay away from the street.
Yeah.
Those are not things that are worthy of discussion.
Right.
Right. And there are times when you just need your kid to listen just because they need to listen. There's a much higher probability that will happen if you've been reliable in enforcing those instructions that you do give.
Yeah. Reliable in the small things, then in the big things, they know you mean business type thing.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so skipping back to where we were, do not give instructions you are not prepared to enforce. And these are all about verbal. Is there anything with, say, written?
Yeah, as kids get older and get more verbal skills, but also as their life expands a little bit, it's not as convenient, I guess, to give them verbal instructions all the time. Not only that, but you're moving from having direct influence over what their behavior is to backing away and giving them more room to operate independently within your guidelines, right? So you don't want to follow your 9-year-old around all day and just give them a string of instructions what to do. You want to be able to say, okay, here's a couple of expectations for you. Mm-hmm. And to make sure that we understand them in a speed limit kind of way, we're going to just write them down.
Okay. And now, is this the same thing, or is this different than the rules we're writing up on our board or taping to the refrigerator that we talked about in the previous episode?
No, exactly the same thing. And in fact, we're going to go back and refine those ideas a little bit more going forward. But I'm a big fan of writing rules down. I mean, I've had people come into my clinic who, parents and kids have been having the same argument over expectations for 5 years. And the parents say, you never do this. I'm like, well, you never told me to do that. Yes, I told you to do that, 2 weeks ago or whatever. And they keep having the same argument as opposed to write it down once, post it on the refrigerator, or in your case, the snap frame whiteboard or whatever you have.
Good memory.
And then it's done. And then if there's any question about it, you go back and point to it, there it is. And so even when kids are not really fully verbal yet, I don't think it's a bad idea to write things down so that you can go back and refer to those things and start demonstrating to them that no, there's a set of expectations here. This isn't just me arbitrarily deciding things on the fly.
Right.
This is the way our house runs.
Right, and it's written right over there. Refer to it. Absolutely. So these were 10 different tools to put in your toolbox to really help you as a parent have a better way to give effective instructions. And reminder, these will be on the handout.
Yep.
And so if you didn't get them all, it's okay. Click on that link and read through them again. Take your own notes. If I start incorporating each of these into my parenting consistently, I will be more effective, and my kids will know better what I want from them.
Yeah, we've been like, or not we, I have been, pretty long-winded in getting to this point, and given lots and lots of background information, mainly because my hope is that people who listen will leave with a body of knowledge that allows them to make refinements and changes along the way. Now we're getting down to some things that are, okay, all of those principles of learning and teaching and motivation and discipline, everything that we've talked about to this point, now we're getting down to, okay, tomorrow morning, I can get up and this is how I'm going to implement those things.
Oh, man. So parents, you've listened to approximately 464 hours of this podcast and we're there. We've made it to tomorrow morning's challenges. Let's keep this going.
Okay. So written instructions, a couple of things to keep in mind is clarity is important. That same principle of fewer words is better applies. So the more you can nail it down, the more concise you can be, the better. Generally speaking, you want to make sure that you're not setting things up that interrupt their agenda unnecessarily. Again, what we're trying to do is teach them to be responsible to behavior at home so they'll know how to be responsible for their own behavior once they get out of the house. We're not trying to find ways to, make them indentured servants. Mm-hmm. It's just like, okay, you got to start trying to figure out how to fit this in to your thinking about how your day operates here. If things are done well or optimally, then your kid is not really going to have to ask you a lot of questions about what's required and whether or not they are able to go do whatever they want to do, because they're clear enough about what the expectations are that they know whether or not they've met them. And if I've met them, then I should be good to go. If I haven't met them, then there's really not much reason for me to ask the question because I'm not going.
As I hear this, I feel like there are adults who wish there's this much clarity from their bosses.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same thing, right? I mean, what we're talking about is just behavior, right? And it's being respectful of other people, but also respectful of yourself as a parent, respectful of the responsibility, the role you have as a parent, and recognizing stuff and you can't explain it all to your kids. Sometimes you just have to tell them what you need to have done. And as they learn how to do that, at the point where you're no longer active as their parent, they are assuming the role of parent for themselves, they've got a good model and a good structure for doing that.
Excellent. So in your book, would this be the right spot for us to jump up with the Caitlin example?
Yeah, let me add one more thing before we do that. So when you write down expectations, essentially you're creating a contract. And like every other contract, there are two parties and each party has responsibilities. The responsibility of the child is to meet these expectations that you've laid out for them. The responsibility for the parent is to deliver whatever consequence they agree to as a result of doing that. And again, consequence is not good or bad by definition. It could be either. But if you say, if you do these things that are on this list, then you're pretty much free to do what you want to do within the limits of the rules. That has to be true. If you say, if you do these things, I'm going to deliver an allowance to you of $1 a day or whatever, that has to be true. You have to be as good as your word if you expect them to be as good as yours. So this is not a one-way deal. This is a two-party contract.
Excellent. All right.
Okay. So Caitlin, and we're using Caitlin as, and I think that's the name I used in the book. I don't remember, honestly. Just here's a sample kind of list of rules. And the number one rule is follow instructions the first time they're given. If you have no other rule, you can cover a lot of territory with that, right? Because you can always give an instruction and then hold the person accountable for that. So in my mind, that's always at the top of the list somewhere.
Okay.
And we say the first time given because we're following the gravity model that we talked about way back when, and who knows what previous episode.
Right.
Is, I'm not mad at you. I'm not upset. I don't give you warnings. I don't give you explanations. I don't give you second chances. I just act. So here it is. Other examples, and again, there's nothing particularly useful about these other than these are ones that come up a lot in families that I work with. Use appropriate language. Okay? So it's not yelling, not arguing, not name calling. That's implied by that, but I'm phrasing it in a positive way. So I've got something to teach back to, not just something to say, don't do, not something to avoid, something to approach. Food and drink stays in the kitchen only, not no food in your bedroom. 2 hours or less of screen time a day. Bedtime, list a particular time. And each of those, has an identified deadline associated with it. So something like that. But whatever those number of rules is, as we spoke about before, it should be few, maybe 3, 4, 5, more than that, and you're going to lose track of them and you're not going to enforce them reliably. So it would be better for you to have 2 rules that you enforce 100% of the time than 10 rules that you enforce each of once in a while. Then you've got inconsistency, you've got uneven teaching, and so on. So again, just a couple of ideas there, and I'll include that on the handout just to a sample of what some of those might look like. So as we spoke about before, we got rules and then we got chores, and typically I divide chores up into daily and then some kind of weekly thing.
Okay.
So daily chores might be make your bed before breakfast, load the dishwasher right after dinner, put dirty clothes in the hamper before bed. And what do you notice about all of those things?
Well, they are short. They're commands. They are. Oh man, I feel like I'm missing it. When I hear this song, I'm like, oh man, I don't have the correct answer yet.
All of those things are true, but all of them also include a deadline.
Okay, very good.
They must be done by this time, right? And other examples that I give later on here, clothes and personal items off the floor, clean your bedroom by noon Sunday, but not just clean your bedroom. Here are the specific steps required in cleaning your bedroom. Collect all trash and take it to the curb by this time, this date, right? If there isn't a deadline, if it's open-ended, then we're doing 2 things. One is we're leaving room for interpretation, room for argument. It's 45-ish.
Yeah.
And the other more important thing is that you're not providing good training opportunities, because what you're really training here is not, how to operate a vacuum. What you're training is pay attention to the timelines on these things. And the adult skill here is, you can be the last person to get on the airplane before they close the door and you get to go. But if you're 1 minute late and you're on this side of the door, you're staying here. It's staycation time. You can pay your taxes right up till midnight on April 15th, but 12:01 is late, and they may be, sympathetic to your excuses, but you're still going to get fined.
Right.
So the idea is to provide a deadline, which implies that, but also now you're starting to give the kids some latitude to figure out on their own.
Right.
Right. I'm not going to bug you about this. I'm not going to remind you. So you figure out when you want to get this done. But if it's 6:30 and it's not done, then we have a problem.
There's actually freedom in it. So that the kid can continue working on their puzzle or continue doing whatever they're doing at that time, but they know by bedtime I have to put my dirty clothes in the hamper.
Yeah, and it's not if you interrupt, right? As kids get older, they're busy doing things, and you hit them with a lot of that right now stuff. They're going to feel like it's disrespectful, and they're going to feel that way because it's true.
Yeah.
Right. It's you start to give them some latitude on figuring out, and they start to learn how to take some responsibility for it.
Excellent. So we've got these rules. You're giving daily chores, some weekly chores. You said clean the bedroom, but you gave steps on how to do that. And the other weekly chores could be, for me growing up, my mom actually had, and I asked her just the other day, I said, why did we have a daily dusting schedule? Because dust doesn't come every day. I'm like, why did we have that? And she said, well, the house you grew up in is the same house my parents still live in now. It's a small house. And there just weren't a whole lot of things to do. And by giving you a daily dusting and vacuuming schedule, she said that was my way of being able to give you some discipline. So
good for her.
And so that for her was daily rather than weekly, but it's because our house just wasn't big enough to have that many tasks.
So there's always some daily, right?
Yes.
You want to have that. And I think we talked a little bit last time about, my thought is always that, the majority of the chores can be in the kids' room or with the kids' possessions or whatever, but at least some of them ought to be something like the household dusting schedule, something that contributes to the family or to the shared space. And then, they should have something to do on weekends so that it's not just, okay, I'm off the hook here. I don't stop working on weekends. I mean, I'm still doing stuff.
Do you remember the Sabbath day? Keep it holy?
Yeah, that's Sunday, right?
That's we could have a whole nother episode on that. But so it sounds like these could actually work really well with like allowance. Is that something that Dr. Tim Riley, are you an advocate for allowance?
I am, depending on how I think about it. People think about it in different ways. I mean, I know how I think about it. I think it's most useful. And it aligns with everything we've talked about to this point in terms of teaching incrementally, teaching today's behavior today, and then going on to the next day, right? So some people will think in terms of I'll give you some money, a set amount of money, and you figure out what to do with it. My approach is always, look, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, I'll give you some money. So if you have taken care of all of your chores and you've not broken any rules during that day, that's worth something, right? And so I'm going to reward that behavior with, $1 or a quarter or whatever the economy in your house is based on how old your kid is. And I'll put my initials on the calendar. Now you've earned $3. And if you don't get chores done tomorrow, or you break a rule or whatever, which is going to result in a whole other disciplinary sequence, you're not going to earn any money for that day, but you don't lose the money you earned the day before. Each day stands on its own. Each day's got enough trouble for itself, right?
Oh, biblical.
But the other idea is that, today didn't work out well for me, but I can get up tomorrow and get back on the horse,
right,
and start earning money again.
Right. So just like you're not going to take away previous day's money, you're not going to be like, that's it, you can't earn for the next 2 weeks. The next day you start over. So literally on our snap frame calendar that we have up, I can have these rules, have the chores listed, and then if they accomplish their 1 or 2 or whatever it is in that day, I can put down Benton's initials on that day. And then at the end of the week, I count it up. And if it's 50 cents a day, you've earned $3. Congratulations.
Yeah, whatever it is. And then again, this is part of your contract, which is if you say, I'm going to give you this money on noon Sunday, you better have the cash on noon Sunday. And then there also tend to arise some conversations about, can I borrow against my allowance and some of those kind of things, which, you figure out how you want to manage those. But now you're having discussions about money management that are different, right? Now you can talk about savings. Now you can talk about, what percentage of this is going to go to the church, what percentage is going to go to savings, however you think about it in your house.
Wow. In your book, you talk about a job card.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that in detail maybe next time, a couple of times downstream, but we get down to specifics really. And I think either this session or next session, we're going to start talking about levels of consequences, how you respond to behavior, right? So we're talking about, allowance here on the one side,
right?
And think all the way back to, I don't know, session 2 or 3 or something that we talked about repetition and contrast.
Yes.
We talked about contrast is the difference in what happens to the child based on what their behavior is.
Yes. Oz and Kansas.
Oz and Kansas, right? So if you think back to the old movie, right? Oz is colorful, happy
wonderful
music,
land of Oz.
Very enjoyable, exciting, be a friendly place, all of that. That's how you want your kid's life to be, as long as they're behaving appropriately.
Right. We hear he is a whiz of a whiz if ever a whiz there was.
Yeah, yeah.
Good stuff.
I'm sure that's true.
If you haven't seen that movie, we won't give you any spoilers, but it's like 400 years old, so check it out.
At 60 anyway, so most everyone has seen that movie or knows about it. So the idea of contrast is demonstrated nicely by, as long as you're doing what you're supposed to do, great. As long as you're meeting these expectations that I've laid out for you, I'm going to make your life as Oz-like as I possibly can. It's going to be enjoyable and fun and interesting, and you're going to have treats and all of this kind of thing. But the minute you don't meet these expectations, Kansas.
Oh, the worst state of all the states.
Black and white, flat, boring, dull Kansas.
As portrayed in the movie. For real Kansas people, it's lovely. We love Kansas.
However, if you think back to the movie, Dorothy's in her room and there's the door that opens out to Oz after her house lands. So we never want a kid to feel like, well, I'm stuck in this situation, or it's not clear to me how I get from Kansas back to Oz. The door's always there. It's always available, but we want it to be up to the child to determine whether or not they get back there. So we want to avoid consequences that involve things like, well, if you just wait an hour, then you can do this. Or some passage of time, or I'll let you know, or when you feel like you're ready to go back. That's a really bad idea, right? For a variety of reasons, not the least of which is what we want to do is give kids a chance to complete a teaching interaction, and it's not a teaching interaction. It's not actually discipline until they've done something appropriate, useful, positive, and you have said, great job. And by the way, here's your stuff back, right? That's a complete teaching interaction. Otherwise, it's just punishment. And that's not going to accomplish what you want to accomplish. That's telling them not to go this way, but it doesn't tell them where to go instead.
This is a bit of a review, but it's also launching us forward, getting us deeper into this. I think this is also a good shot for us to say, you know what, we've learned a lot today, and let's jump back into this on our next episode. My brain is filling up. That means yours might be as well. But Dr. Tim Riley, thanks for joining us in another episode of Beyond Sunday Parenting Podcast. Any last words for our people?
We hear he is a whiz of a whiz.
If ever a whiz there was. Yes. So we're off to the...
We want to while away the hours.
We want to live more in Oz than Kansas. Unless you're from Kansas, it's delightful. Favorite character?
Thoughts I'd be thinking I could be another Lincoln. If I only had a brain.
Do you have a favorite character from Wizard of Oz? That's it, the Scarecrow. I'm more of the Cowardly Lion.
I can see that.
What was the question? Like, what if you run into a hippopotamus? I'd beat him from top to bottomus.
What about a rhinoceros?
I don't remember that one. What was the rhinoceros one?
Imposterous or something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
I show him who's
Hippopotamus, right?
who's king of the forest. Oh. Whatever. All right. Keep parenting well.